All right, and again, everybody, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Business Intelligently. We're actually going to discuss what is business intelligence today, and this is going to be part of our Prepare for Impact webinar series. My name is Brian Munson. I am the Business Development and .coop Sales Manager for NCBA CLUSA. I will be today's webinar moderator. The webinar today is co-hosted by Medullus Systems. They are an associate member of NCBA CLUSA. Once again, Prepare for Impact is our exclusive webinar series that will explore the key issues that will shape our 2017 Co-op Impact Conference. The Impact Conference will be held October 4th through the 6th in Alexandria, Virginia, and given the role that business intelligence plays in our economy, we wanted to open up this discussion to our members and to just our general participants today. So purchasing co-ops in particular will focus on this topic during their masterclass workshops, so we do look forward to that additional discussion. And some of these examples that you'll see today will come through that purchasing co-op lens. But at the end of this particular three-part series, we expect that you'll have a better understanding of business intelligence and how to use it. And our Prepare for Impact series will focus on several other topics in the coming months. Some of those topics include marketing the co-op identity, membership, technology, and other key issues that all co-ops experience. So we do look forward to you joining us for those. Before we begin today, just a quick bit of housekeeping. Participant phone lines will be muted during this presentation to reduce background noise. There will be a chance, of course, to pose questions, just not verbally. So if you do have a question, just type it into the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. Questions will be collected and answered as time allows at the end of the program. And lastly, we will be recording this program and it will be archived on our website. You will receive an email containing the link to the posted recording tomorrow, and you will be able to listen to it and share it with colleagues and peers and anyone else that would find the information interesting. So with that said, your panelist today is Ronnie Banerjee. He's Partner and Business Development Director at Medullus Systems. Ronnie is going to tell you a little bit more about himself and Medullus and how they work with cooperatives. And so with that said, I'll gladly turn this webinar over to Ronnie and we can get started.
Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me good?
I can hear you great.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone from cloudy New York here. This is as Brian said, one of the first part of the business intelligence series of seminars. I'll quickly talk about, just bear with me, I don't know why this happens. Okay. All right. We'll talk a little bit about, in the next hour, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a quick intro of who I am, who Medullus is, and then we'll jump into the, into BI and business intelligence right away. What does BI mean in today's world? How do companies implement a BI solution to kind of get into the components of business intelligence, and then get deeper into the actual industry of, or the type of companies where this pertains to. What does BI mean for buying groups, purchasing cooperatives, kind of like member-owned organization. We'll get through some benchmarks across different industries and how is BI shaping up across different markets, different industries. So we'll do that, and then I'll talk of a couple of examples, really case studies, quick case studies. Example of a successful BI and why was it successful, and example of actually a failed BI implementation and why did it fail. And then actually I'll show you a couple of live examples, one from a buying group actually where BI was implemented and quite well and quite successfully. And then I'll show you an example from another industry where business intelligence is used very heavily, and that's market research. So how market research companies use business intelligence. And finally, I'll just end with, how can a company like yours or an organization like yours get started with business intelligence. And I'll open it up after that for question and answer. So that's the next 1 hour. Hopefully we'll keep it interesting. So who am I? I'm partner of Medullus Systems. We are a software solutions provider. I'm also the author of Buying Group Software, which is basically a think tank of Medullus just for buying groups. And our niche is software solutions for buying groups and purchasing cooperatives. That's what we mainly do. So since 2000, we've been implementing software for buying groups, all kinds of software, end-to-end enterprise software. We do EDI software, billing software, business intelligence, member and vendor management, and rebate software for buying groups. Total, we're in 5 buying groups as of now, 3 pretty large buying groups, and we've been there since the early 2000s, and 2 small. Large buying groups are about 500 plus dealers. The other 2 are just about 100 dealers. 3 of them actually do central billing, so we kind of do their entire operational software. The other 2 are mainly member management kind of software that we've been writing for them and developing and managing and implementing them. And, personally, I truly believe in the success of member-owned organizations because, we're a small business and we believe in the independent dealership and the, helping small businesses grow our communities, our society, and that's how communities flourish. So I believe in the success of a member-owned organization helps independent, dealers grow by bringing their collective buying power and having strong supply relationships and partnerships at the back. So that's my personal belief, and that's why we are interested in buying groups. That's where we have been in buying groups, and we enjoy working with buying groups and purchasing co-op. Why am I doing this webinar? Brian really told me you got to do it. I'm just kidding. Actually, we wanted to bring in 17 years of BI experience, hopefully to buying groups and to NCBA CLUSA members, and hope that brings some value. We have, our belief in the co-op mission and values, that collective buying power, the strength in numbers. We truly believe that. And our belief in the greater good of the independent dealer and of the small business, as I said. And we also believe that we can actually make a difference. We have made difference in buying groups that we've worked with and purchasing cooperatives. And that's where we see, our belief. So that's why we wanted to do this webinar, mainly for educational purposes also, hopefully can learn some from you guys that are viewing this and may have some questions that would spur some more discussion and some meaningful, dialogue about business intelligence in general and about buying groups and purchasing cooperatives. And hopefully we can bring some value and some information to you guys. All right. So first, right off the bat, any burning questions for me before I begin? And I'll take a quick 30-second here to see if there's any question. If not, I'm just going to move right ahead. And if you have any questions, as Brian said, feel free to put it in the webinar chat area, and then we'll take it up later on as well. So getting right into it, what does BI mean in today's business? Well, for the longest period of time, BI, business intelligence, has been, people have considered that's like reporting. Well, it's gone a little further, and today kind of it refers to actually technologies and applications and practices for collecting data, for integrating data, for analysis and presentation of data and business information. And this is actually a definition which I actually really like. There are several definitions out there from different sources, but this is a very simple, easy to understand definition. The purpose of BI is really to support and help make better business decisions, and that's what really BI in today's business really means. Continuing on, businesses today's businesses, they're looking for different ways to become agile, get to market quicker, bring operational changes quicker, and not just quicker, but do it efficiently in a lean manner, cut down waste. That's what businesses are looking to do today. And be intelligent. Businesses are looking to be intelligent, and what intelligent means is, be able to, make operational changes in a better way so that it actually helps customers. It actually fosters better vendor relationships. So businesses are today, They're looking for different ways to actually get intelligent. They're looking to get proactive, not reactive, not wait for something to happen and then act to it. They proactively are trying to hit a market or penetrate a market or reach out to a customer before a problem actually becomes a nagging problem. And businesses are looking for ways to be connected and be social. And that is, in general, what businesses are trying to become in today's today's economy, in today's micro economy. And as businesses are trying to do that, automation is now the big thing in technology. As you guys see, this whole big move and push towards automation. It was the advent of the internet, of course, then the social thing came on and the cloud came on, and now the next big thing is automation and artificial intelligence. And that can only be achieved when machines become intelligent and are able to make intelligent decisions. Actually, a couple of AI researchers and a lot of AI researchers are actually saying that we're just at the periphery of that. We're far, far away from automation. So machines are still not going to take over. Maybe in 100 years, maybe in 50 years, 200 years, computational power is growing, but it's still not there. But automation is the next big thing. And part of business intelligence is somewhat of that automation, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But data is at that heart of that intelligence. So data from different sources. Now, for the macro or the consumer-driven world, right, the business to consumer-driven world, business leaders are really interested in that big data. So if you are a large organizations that reaching out to consumers, for example, Apple, Walmart, these guys are looking for this big data kind of thing, which is making sense of unstructured data. And I'll talk a little bit about what unstructured and structured data is. But that's what on the macro side, on the larger side, and on the consumer-driven world. But for the micro organization at the organizational level and the business-to-business driven world, business leaders are actually interested in this business intelligence, which is making sense of structured data and maybe a little bit of that unstructured data. And I'll talk a little bit about what that is, but that's the difference. The larger world is kind of looking more into that big data, business B2B kind of stuff. More on the micro side, they're looking into into the business intelligence, which is structured data, and also a little bit of the unstructured data. So what is that unstructured data? Unstructured data, actually, it's interesting that most of the big research companies, Forrester, the Aberdeen Group, Gartner, they kind of have come out and said, well, most of the data, which is 80% of the data, is actually unstructured in our lives, in our business lives, in our personal lives, and it is actually unstructured, which is emails, website, discussions, social, the mobile stuff. That kind of data cannot fit into a database. So that's what is unstructured. It's really simple. It cannot fit into a database, cannot go into an Excel spreadsheet, into a row and a column. So that is unstructured data. And that is actually big data. That's a simplified version of a simplified definition, but that truly is big data. Now 5 to 10% is like semi-structured. So they have some structure, but they need to be actually, in order to move into a structured form, they kind of need to be massaged. So like, comma separated files, Excel files, text files, flat files. So they can fit into the database, but they kind of have to be massaged. So about 5 to 10% is semi-structured, and only about 5 to 10% is structured, which is actually in database, and which we call, I call it operational data. That's data that's getting created through a system. So business intelligence typically is these two avenues or these two strata of data, if you will. The 80% of the data, which is unstructured, is truly not part of business intelligence. Companies say, yes, we do that, but that is more of big data analytics, and that moves into a completely different form of technology. Where business intelligence comes in, and I believe where business companies can start with some intelligence and we'll start with structured data. They can then over time move in, get some semi-structured data, and if they want to get into the larger macro world, they can start bringing in some unstructured data. But that's kind of the evolution of business intelligence. So as we move on, this is an interesting thing. Business intelligence is not necessarily marketing intelligence, although they're a subset of each, and I'll explain that. Term marketing intelligence refers to technologies, application, and practices that are collected, integrated, analyzed, and presented of external data collected. So business intelligence has both internal data, which is operational data, stuff that organizations are doing operationally daily. For example, marketing, more of internal marketing, inventory, accounts receivable, payable, sales, all that operational data is business intelligence as a whole, but it also has marketing intelligence into it. But marketing intelligence is a subset of business intelligence, and it refers to the collection of external data to make some business decisions about markets. So, what markets to go into, what markets to penetrate, what's the position of an organization in a market, what kind of marketing opportunity there is. So that's marketing intelligence. So MI can be a subset of BI if implemented in such way. So that's a nice distinction. So we jump right into, now that we know, kind of have an idea of BI in today's world, as I said, it's more about making companies agile, lean, and getting into that connected social state. What does it entail implementing a BI solution? So implementing a BI solution is a series of steps. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty of this, right? So a company can actually implement a BI solution through a series of continuous builds and continuous implementation. It is a finite project. It can be done, but it's something that just evolves over time for an organization. So this is I believe that this is a nice way to actually implement a BI solution. And we'll showcase why an implementation of this actually has been successful, and companies that haven't gone this kind of route has some risks in not being able to implement a good BI solution. So it really starts with strategizing, internally, and trying to understand what is the BI solution required. So what are my organizational measurements? That's like the first question that you're asking, right? How do I measure my, different metrics of my organization? Is it sales? Is it inventory turns? Is it marketing penetration into membership? Is it vendor management? Is it units or widgets that I've sold? Is it penetration into a certain territory? So those are, what are my organizational measurements? And then the next question that you kind of ask, and these are not just done in phases, but this is kind of like strategizing as a whole. How do you define success for your organization and for your customers, your members, vendors, relationship and partnership, for your whole ecosystem? How do you define success? And then the next question that you ask, how do you know that the strategy that you're putting forth is not working? How do you define that? Well, these are the things we will do in order to know that strategy is not working, because you kind of need to know that whether it's working or not. And a lot of times, a lot of organizations are always working on, let's just measure what's working. Well, we kind of have to always know what's not working so that you can negate that, you can mitigate that as you go along. Then the next question you can ask is, what is your growth strategy? How is the organization going to grow? What does growth really mean? After that, you can do some, SWOT analysis, find out strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, threats, for the organization, for the industry, for the markets, as it pertains to your members, then as it pertains to vendors, as it pertains to the buying group as a whole. You can ask questions like, what makes my organization unique? And a lot of companies actually do this strategy session right at the onset. And companies do this all the time. As I'm sure you guys are doing this all the time. The companies are doing this all the time, but you're doing this with a notion of that you're going to actually implement some kind of an intelligence solution, a business intelligence solution. So that's at the backdrop. So you're sitting down and you're doing the strategy with the notion of going and implementing maybe a BI solution. Once you have a clear-cut strategized, a plan, then you get into defining what we call the actors and measurements. So the actors are, who are the actors of your business, your operations, of your ecosystem? It's, for buying group, it's, their members. If you have sales, you have salesperson. You could have member states, member territories. You have vendors. You may have products that, if you're taking billing. Those are kind of the actors. Who are the actors? So basically an actor also a noun of your business. They're also the entities of your business, right? And then you need to define what you do is, what are the different measures? So for, how do we measure the effectiveness of a vendor partnership? How do we measure, how do we measure a member's growth? How do we measure a member's participation in the buying group? So these are measures. And the next question that a lot of companies don't ask is, why do we even need to measure that? How is that going to help my strategy that we defined earlier on? And finally, once you've defined the actors and measurements, you're going to start peeling down that onion and get into that, what am I going to do with this information? If I have this information right in front of me, what do I even need to do with it? Right. So once you've strategized, you've defined your actors, you've defined the measurements, you then get into this IT side where you're kind of looking at where data exists for these actors, these measurements, and you build what you call the universe. Companies call it the data warehouse. It's that one-stop shop where all the data will need to get loaded to build a BI implementation. We call it the universe because that's really what it is. It's a central repository or warehouse. That's where the BI solution is developed, the database or the data warehouse is built, and then from there on, it starts moving into implementation, which is presenting that data. Dashboards get built, reports are created, it's presented. Now comes the IT decisions. Do you need to have a hosted solution? Is it going on the cloud? Is it over web? Do you render it over mobile? What kind of security is required? Who's viewing this? Do we need to create offline views? That's a question a lot of folks don't ask, but it's a very important thing. What if you're in a place where a report needs to be shown, but there's no internet? Then comes the question of how can we share a dashboard, but not share sensitive information? How can we take a quick snapshot of a dashboard and scoot it over to somebody? How can we share reports? How can we distribute reports? Can we take a quick report and publish it to a social channel, to an email? So that's, now that you have strategized, you've defined actors, measurements, you have built your universe, now you have presented it. And then now it's time, now it's the real fun begins right here, where you're starting to get the data, you have it nicely presenting, but now comes the analysis and trying to make that what we call the actionable. That's probably the ultimate stage of a BI implementation, where you take it and make it what we call the AI, or the actionable intelligence. And I'll show you an example of in a buying group where we took BI, there was BI implementation, and it was made into an actionable intelligence, and how companies have done that also. But really, at this point, you now have dashboards that actually make sense. A lot of dashboards look beautiful and pretty, but that's what it is. It's just a nice dazzling report, but does it really make sense? What am I going to do with that? Does it tell you a story? Can it actually tell you a story from this year what happened, last year what happened, over the last 5 years what happened, what's going to happen? And does it give you the data that tells you what is actually working and why is it working? So it tells you data, this is working great. And again, same thing, these are the loopholes, these are certain roadblocks, these are certain red areas, if you will. And then the most important thing, it's data that tells you what to do next. And that's true intelligence, where data is telling you, okay, now you need to do this to get there. For example, if you have billing and you're doing, you have accounts receivable, and you have days sale outstanding, for example, as a standard performance indicator to see, is collection getting weaker for certain members? In that case, does it tell you, if members pay certain invoices, do their DSO go up? Those are kind of actions. Those are kind of data that tells you certain things to do. And we'll take a look at some of these actionable stuff. But once you have this cycle, now you're into this really cool and neat BI implementation, where now you have taken actionable data, you're analyzing, and now your business is giving you the insights, if you will. And then you can take that and get back into strategy again. Say, okay, now let's look at, now we have this information, let's look at next year or next quarter, next month, and see how we can strategize. And once again, as you get into deeper markets, you're getting to other territories or moving into different, products, for example, or different vendors. At that point of time, you're again defining new actors and measurements. You're again populating the universe, creating more, varied data sets. And then again, moving on. So that's, I believe, is a good way of implementing a BI solution. It's a cycle. It happens over time. And so these are certain components of a BI solution. So moving on. Now, we spoke a little bit about this universe, so let me just delve right into that, because that's kind of like the black hole, if you will, for a lot of folks who are not into this, you know, the actual IT part of building this. I'll get in a little bit about what is this BI universe. Okay, it's basically the backbone of the business intelligence solution. It's the data warehouse. That's where all the data resides. Now, it's not your current database, it's not Excel spreadsheets, but it's a culmination of all that data cleaned and massaged and loaded into this business warehouse or data warehouse, what we call the universe. It is basically, again, as I said, the central repository of all data that is required to build the entire BI solution. Now, bear in mind, though, you know, one of the things that people always say, well, once I build the universe, can I update it? Absolutely. You know, that's the whole idea. If you remember, as you find more actionable intelligence, as you analyze, you strategize, you constantly get through this circle, and you build the universe all along, and you update it. So data can come from a number of sources. It can come from any type or any format. So data initially can come from any different sources. Data will have to be massaged and loaded into the universe so that it actually makes sense, because it has to be in some kind of a structured format. Now, this data typically contains dimensions and measures. What we call the actors are those dimensions, the entities of the business, and the measures that measure what those actors are doing. And it's almost always n dimensions. And I'll talk a little bit about what that is, but as opposed to a regular two-dimensional database with rows and columns. So typically the BI universe is almost always n dimensions, and n is the number of actors that you want to actually measure in your business. And it contains the relationship across these dimensions and data across the relationships. So it's got n dimensions. For example, you have member, vendor, product, for example, could be 3 dimensions. And then across these dimensions, you could have data or measures that are present across these dimensions. So for example, I'll take you a simple example over here, what a regular database, which is a 2-dimensional database, and an n-dimensional universe looks like. So here, for example, you have member and vendor data, for example, sales by member and vendor. So for a particular member, you have vendor sales, you know, then you have the next vendor. So this is a 2-dimensional data. It can reside in Excel, in a SQL database, in Oracle, in whichever database it is. It could be in flat files. For example, this is a sales database, and it actually has one measure. It's sales, right? You can have another 2-dimensional database where you have vendor and product, right? And you have sales against it. Now here, instead of sales, you're having, for example, rebates. It has another measure. And you have other 2-dimensional data tables, databases, data stores, wherever it's coming from. You could have EDI data. You could have, actually, you could have semi-structured data coming from social tools, but we're not going to get there today. But you can have 2-dimensional data exists everywhere. So what happens from here is that 2-dimensional data is loaded into what we call this cube. And this cube is actually here, to simplify it, I've just kept 3 dimensions, which is basically a cube, but it could have n number of dimensions. This could be a 5, 10, 15-sided cube, depending on how many actors you want to, you know, measure. And so for example, here, when you load this data, these two, they actually have a cube gets built in this data warehouse or this universe where you have product, vendor, and member. You have this member now in a z-axis, if you will. And if you load other things, for example, you can have sub dimensions, like, for example, member state. You can have member join here. You can have, you know, territory or zone of the member. So here, looking at a simplified cube, you have 3 dimensions, and across the joints of each of these particular entities, for example, a particular product for a particular member and a vendor, you can actually, the cube actually stores all these measures. So member by vendor by product, it stores all the data, sales, rebates, member penetration, AR data, whatever the measures are that you want to measure in your business. So data from all these 2-dimensional sources get loaded into the cube, and once that universe is built, excellent, now it renders into all the reports. You can build custom dashboards, you can have custom reports. So it's the first step is to understand what those actors are, what those measures are, find out where the sources are, and then figure out this cube and load this cube, you know. And once this cube is created, then it's rendered out into different reports. That's really the heart of this business intelligence and creating that n-dimensional universe. Now, BI for buying groups, here are some examples. So here's some of the stuff that you know, we've done. For example, measuring penetration into existing membership, sales, purchases. You know, that's a measure, right? How effective are my vendor relationships? What does the word effective really mean to you? How can I maximize rebates? Which programs are working and why? Which programs are not working and why? You know, who's supporting the co-op and what does it, and who's not, why? And what does supporting really mean? You know, are they buying a lot of rebatable products? Are they just billing through? Early warning indicators, if you're taking billing, you know, early warning indicators for AR problems, you know, collections, credits, claims, those kind of measures. And then now getting more into that marketing intelligence, for example, you know, getting into market data and benchmarking to other co-ops and buying groups. And you'll see in the next series, you'll be, you know, CoMetrics will present you that kind of information. They have an excellent system where they benchmark market data and brings a lot of marketing intelligence. So getting into benchmarking, you know, so now that we've seen what, you know, how BI, the different components of a BI, we'll get into some benchmarking here. At a first glance, it looks grim because a lot of companies jump right into a tool and they just buy this tool and they put it in there and they really didn't take the time to strategize and figure out, do they really need a BI tool? A lot of companies may or may not require, they may have the reports today that gives them the insight. They just probably need to massage it and create that universe. So here are some tools. Here are some BI benchmarking. Despite billions spent, BI adoption is still terrible. That's Gartner. 22% adoption rate. BI scorecard. Lack of completeness of vision is one of the big reasons why Gartner says that they're hard for end users to use. The average number of days it takes to get reports built with traditional BI tools has been 6.1 number of days. That's not good. You should be able to get a report anytime from the universe if it's done correctly. You know, 64% business decision makers are not able to get the answers they're seeking. And again, do heavily concentrate around IT, not around business. You know, that's some information that we found from benchmarking BI tools and BI implementations. And there are some reasons behind that. It's just, as I said, the main reasons that they've said is there's a lack of completeness of vision. And that's one of the main reasons that Gartner said. So strategizing early on, finding out, you know, what you want to get out of a BI implementation. Why do you want to really do that? And those are discussions you can have with a BI person or internally if you have that person or your IT, and then coming up with that and working with business and see, you know, what kind of reports really will help. Now, there is some hope. You know, these are the good metrics. You know, companies using analytics are 5 times more likely to make faster decisions. You know, that's again that agility, the lean, you know, being proactive. So that's definitely one of the good things. Over 50% will have access to self-service tool by 2017, which is kind of this year. A lot of companies are actually planning to deploy mobile business intelligence. We are businesses mobile, so what does that look like? You know, so that's important. And how, you know, when it comes to mobile BI, that is a really a different animal. Not so much, but it's a subset of BI. But here, things like, you know, security and information, those kind of things come along. You know, how does the BI render over a cell phone? And here's another very interesting benchmarking. There are reductions in costs, definitely, if implemented correctly. And again, it increases revenue and sales, the stuff that we want more. I mean, these are from multiple sources, but here's some hope. You know, BI can definitely help organizations grow, again, if implemented correctly. So here's an example of a successful BI implementation. This is at a buying group called LBM Advantage. They are a lumber and building materials buying group. They have 1,000 yards now, close to 1,500 vendors. They do take central billing. It's a custom ERP system written. And they decided to use an Excel-based solution with a back end of Microsoft SQL Server. And they had reasons why they wanted to do Excel-based. A lot of times Um, they were using Excel reporting, so they decided to go with an Excel-based reporting system. That was their decision. Now, why was it successful? How do we measure that? Well, it was implemented about 10 years ago. It took 6 months to get done. The initial discussion took about 3 months internally, having a lot of different discussions, meetings, so that kind of happened, not on a daily basis, but people met, people discussed, people strategized, the actors, the measurements were done. But since then, the number of reports requested to IT has been 0. It's all self-serve reporting. People do not request reports anymore at LBM Advantage. They have the universe. They can pull any report they want. It's used every day by all users. So there is some usage statistic that needs to get collected when a BI is implemented. And I'll talk about that to find out whether a BI is actually bringing value. Then sales, purchase, rebates, and inventory management insights really helped maximize growth. That was measured. Participation increased, penetration to members increased. And then it created, over time, as they went along, they created this actionable intelligence. Example, they built this performance indicator called the P4I. They take central billing, which is a pay quality index. They kind of take AR and they kind of put it over the member's prior AR, and they get an early warning finding out if the member's AR is getting worse. And they built this credit scoring system. And based on a member's credit score between 50 and 100, action is actually taken. So if somebody drops to about 95, somebody gets alerted. Vendors may get alerted when it drops to like 70. Members are actually told if you pay these number of invoices, as I was telling before, your number can actually go up. And this has become a big thing over there. The ability to safeguard AR write-offs is huge, as in a buying group. So that was big, especially during the downturn that came in 2008 and 9. So that really helped them. Another example, for example, these guys did was, they built something called a claims management system. Now, claims are never a good thing. It's always dirty when product doesn't arrive or there's a problem. The claims were just flying all over the place. It's not that they had a lot of claims, but they did have some. And that was a big beef with the member community. So we built a claims management system, and using intelligence and using insights from that claim, the average claim, the age of the claim, came down from 90 days to 20 days. Huge, huge benefit. Members found that they could go into the system, put a claim up, and the claim was getting resolved using good insights, a good tool. So that was some of the reasons why it was successful. Now, why successful? Here are some reasons of why we think it's successful, a good BI, and a lot of BI implementation analysts will say this. First, they had a clear definition of strategy. So they knew they wanted to measure member penetration, maximizing rebates, needed tighter controls, leaner operations, right? It was championed from the top. They had board support to do this project, CEO, CFO support. The important thing that the decisions were not outsourced. The development was outsourced, so the decisions was internal. They had discussions with the consultant, sat down, but the decisions of what needs to be measured, who the actors are, that decision was not outsourced. It was owned by the organization. There was good communication early on. Why were we doing this? How is this going to help us? So that helped users embrace the solution. What will change after the BI is implemented, if anything? Nothing is real big changing. It's going to make our jobs easier. Collection of usage data. So once it was implemented, there was a lot of usage data that was collected. So who's using this? Which parts are getting used? Which KPIs are not getting used? Why are they not getting used? Then over time, they got it to this actionable state where the data was now actually not only giving insights, but rules were being written over data to help take some action. Some of it really well automated, some not automated because controls were required. But over time, that actionable state doesn't happen on day one, and it should not happen on day one. First, the data needs to be trusted, and then you can build action over it. They didn't get dazzled by pretty dashboards and demos, so they created them all along, and they actually built some dashboards themselves. There's some pretty cool jobs building dashboards, and these people were not IT folks. So with a little help from IT, but really over time, they learned to build their own dashboards. It's drag and drop, and they use an Excel-based system. I'll show you what that system looks like. And they had a very well-defined project plan. They were involved in the implementation. there was time commitment that was required, and that was managed early on. So these were some good reasons why they were successful. Now here's an example of a failed business implementation. It's actually at a company called Dorman. And Dorman is a auto OEM manufacturer, the public listed organization, large company. They needed an all-encompassing BI solution around 2009. Why? Because they were spending too much time developing one-off reports. There was duplication of data. So what they did was they did some demos and they bought business objects. It's an excellent product, but they just went ahead and spent a good amount of money and bought this product. They started, but they realized they really did not know what they needed out of a BI implementation. So long story short, the software kind of became a room heater. It kind of sat in the corner. Nobody really did anything. It got shelved after a lot of dollars were spent and time was spent. Why did it fail again? Was it large company problems? Clearly, maybe, but there were some clear points, really. They did not have a project champion. Nobody really championed this project, right? The vision was not laid out. Again, one of the big reasons what Gartner is saying, the lack of clear vision. It wasn't communicated to the users. They were dazzled by beautiful dashboards. They said it was looking pretty, but they really didn't get into the richness of the data. It was their data. A BI tool is a tool, but eventually the data is created by the company. So they were not going with the richness of data. Data loading was too cumbersome. This thing called ETL, which stands for extraction, transform, and load. You extract data, you massage it, and you load it. That was really not well planned. And then they went on to this thing of KPI overload. They created too many measurements too early. And they said, we want to measure this and that. And then they just went into KPI overload. And they really never really created a roadmap. What's going to happen with this tool in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? What does it look like? And these are not difficult things to do. It's just thinking through these things, through these steps. They just did not do that. They bought the tool. They said, we can implement this, and did this. So long story short, one of the most critical things, they really didn't define what success meant for that project. So here's a perfect example. It was really a bad failure. Over time, they went on to build their own tool internally. But that was an example of what this failed, a real life example. I'm going to get you some true real life examples of a BI. So here I'm going to show you what a BI looks like. So I'm going to jump right off this presentation and show you this tool. This is the Excel-based tool of a buying group, and how they're using this Excel-based tool to load business intelligence. So here is, for example, this is an Excel-based tool. It shows you how BI is working for them. So here they're looking at, for example, they're looking at sales, and they're looking at sales over different departments. And this is a lumber and building materials cooperative or a buying group. See how quick this data loads. They have data here from 2008. So this is millions and millions of records. They're a large buying group. They got 1,000 members. They got 1,500 vendors. They have millions of SKUs. This data is actually a slice and dice report. So for example, by salesman, they can quickly drag this and they can find, by department, by sales, by salesmen, or they call them buyers, what sales are. If they want, for example, they can filter this by states. So if they want, for example, we'll pick any state, Michigan, they look at New Jersey, so 2 states. The report filters right away, and this is the data is coming from that cube. Again, this data cannot be changed, but this data is coming from that cube, and that cube is actually rendering this through an Excel spreadsheet because they like Excel-based reporting. Now, it's interesting that you can actually drag this anywhere, and this is using, if you are familiar with Excel pivots, this is what it's using, but it actually now does this across states. So now if you want to measure other things in this, so you can actually add discounts. So you're measuring sales and discounts. If you like, you can actually bring in the data over here. So you can measure sales and discount over here. So as this is happening, if you move the states back up, we can move these around. So if you like, you can do buyers or sales by department. So you can actually drop regions even more. So now you have groups or departments, you have salespeople, and by region. So a good BI tool, for example, is not really about making data pretty. It's about bringing the richness of data and what it can tell you. For example, right here, you can see that something happened in 2017. This particular salesperson did not have any growth here for some reason. These are some missing blocks. So they use it as something called a no sales report. Now, of course, that is an example, and they could do pretty much a lot of things with this. And they have all these different measures. There's year-to-date sales, quantities. They measure footage because they're a lumber company buying group. Now, here's an example where they themselves actually went ahead and built a dashboard. I mean, it's not pretty, but they did a nice dashboard. This is something that they ended up doing, and it's a simple dashboard that shows budgets to sales. The budgets got loaded into the cube, into the data warehouse. Now they have inventory, they have rebate data, and this is a lot of data getting loaded into this cube, and this is something that was built by a salesperson. They dragged and dropped what was needed, and these are charts that got pulled in, and this is an all-encompassing, what they call their windshields, their cockpit of doing business. And this is actually, it's actually pretty interactive. So it actually has these slicers that actually go through, and they can look at kitchen and bath sales and service charges and footage and things like that. They can look at different vendors for rebates, how rebate is doing year to year. So here is an example of a real-life example of a buying group business intelligence. I'm going to quickly show you what a market research company did, and this is from another industry. And this is a market research company that has a lot of data, but a data across columns. So think about a market research company doing market research with 100 questions. Now, this was a BI done over the cloud. It's actually hosted in Azure, Microsoft Azure Cloud. They did a little bit of a brand health for toothpaste companies. So this is an example of how BI was implemented for this market research company. And good BI, for example, that's one of the good elements of BI, is it gives you insights as you're working through it. There is no time lag, there is no phase lag as you're doing this. So for example, you could find out the consideration, the brand consideration, and now you can use that for finding out other kinds of measure, like what is the usage, what is the purchase. So these are examples of BI across different types of platforms. For example, that was an Excel-based, this is a cloud-based online BI tool. This is also a mobile-ready tool. So if you view this, the entire dashboard collapses into a mobile. So moving on. So how can you get started with BI? Well, first I would say you work with a BI consultant, someone that is well-versed with how a buying group or a purchasing co-op works. If you don't have this resource internally, if you have somebody internally who's done BI work, that's the person to work with. Sit down, strategize. First, answer this question. I think once you do this, I think this is a question a lot of folks don't answer. They just jump into it. Do I really need a BI solution? It is time, it is money, it is commitment if you're actually using it. And why do you need it? And if yes, if you say yes, if you answer that unanimously, if you say yes, first define success for that project. And how will I measure the returns from this implementation, the time spent and the money spent, and what is it that success defines? After that, you create a roadmap, you create a communication plan and a detailed implementation plan. That's the BI consultant can do that. And then once you make that decision, you strategize, you figure out who the measurements are, actors are, what the measurements are. You then go out and figure out whether you want to make one or buy one. And then you can do demos of products and services. A lot of companies start with this. And that's that main reason why these BI implementations don't really go much further. They don't achieve the objectives. Maybe the project gets done, but no one's really utilizing it. That's that lack of vision. And once you find out what product you're going to do, whether you're going to make it, whether you're going to buy it, then you can start with getting from A to B. Don't try to implement it all the way. And that's where a lot of people go ahead and start loading the BI tool with 100 reports, with 15 different KPIs, and you have this BI overload. So start getting from A to B and then B to C. And a good BI, they grow with you. They grow with the organization over time, and in turn helps you grow over time. So with that, I come to an end. I'll leave the floor open to questions and hopefully any comments.
Ronnie, that was awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes, Brian, thank you.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. There was a lot of good information to unpack there. We did have one question from a little bit ago, a couple slides ago. Someone was just asking if you could explain ERP and where it fits into this whole equation.
Absolutely. So ERP is as you know, or you may know or may not have implemented in your organization. It stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. It's your company's enterprise software. It started off, a long time ago. It started with an accounting software, and then it evolves into this ERP, which actually brings different divisions and departments under one software system. So you could have sales, you could have a CRM system, a sales system that talks to your marketing system. Data from different divisions are collected into this ERP system. So there are systems that go out and provide services for different divisions or departments of your organization. And the ERP is the central database or the central system that manages all the divisions of actions of a business, right? So that's an ERP system. So that's what your operations is. That's what marketing and sales is using, is an ERP system. So business intelligence actually, right. Go ahead.
I was just, to draw the comparison, how would you describe then Salesforce? I feel like a lot of people are familiar with that tool, and I don't think it necessarily started out as the sort of plug and play that it's become, but would you consider that an ERP or no?
Salesforce is actually a CRM tool, a customer relationship management tool. So an ERP system could be Epicor, could be SAP Business One. It's even QuickBooks Enterprise is a ERP system. It's not just a billing system. You have inventory management, you can have sales, you can have insights. That's an ERP system. And typically BI tools snap into these ERP systems. Well, most ERP systems come with BI tools, some of BI tools, but then there are plugins that get added to a BI tool. To the ERP as a BI.
Sure. We had another question come in. I work with a lot of smaller scale worker-owned co-ops, 10 to 30 workers, which often don't produce a lot of robust internal data. How can this approach scale down, and how can it help them scale up?
Well, it's a good question. It's really the concept of scale really comes down to, again, the IT resources that are getting used. So the first thing I would say is to, again, start with that strategy and understand, what is it that you're looking to get out of a BI implementation. And a lot of people say, well, you're telling me, what am I going to get out of something that I don't know? Well, that's where you sit down and work with somebody. The simple question to ask here is, what kind of data are you looking? What kind of, if you had a dashboard in front of you, if you had something in front of you that's going to help make better business decisions for you, for your worker co-ops, that's information that can help you take action on some of the strategy stuff that you want to do. You want to strategically help them grow. Well, in order to do that, you need some kind of information that you need to present in front of them. Where is that information? Is it easily collected? Can you collect that information from them? Are you getting that information? Are you calling them? Are you asking them? Are you sending out surveys? That kind of stuff. So after you do that, then you sit down and then get into that cycle of BI implementation. And BI projects can be small. Some BI projects can be a couple of weeks and you're done. Some BI projects can take a couple of years again. Like the LBM Advantage was a large implementation. The whole thing took 6 months. But the development was like a couple of months, but it was more of strategy and a lot of that initial thinking internally to understand what that was, working with a consultant.
I'd be interested to know a little bit more about that situation too, because I feel like, when you on the surface it seems like, I don't have a lot of information to gather, or not a lot of inputs, or what do you call them, actors. There's not a lot of that in my universe, but when you sit down and you look at it, there are quite a few things that start to pop up. They're saying, oh, I can get structured data from here, and I'm aware of this unstructured data. Maybe, there's more of it than I think of. And it sounds like, Ronnie, what you're saying is that as long as you go back to that cycle approach that you outlined, that's what you're to follow, and then, the question that you put forward, that's how they scale it up. Is that a fair way to summarize that?
Yeah, that's actually a good way to put it, right? And again, the big question comes down to, a lot of folks actually, to be honest with you, are looking for this beautiful tool that's going to come and solve their business problem. It actually is not the answer, to be honest with you. It's how you actually strategize up front. What is it that you're going to do with the tool? It's a tool at the end of the day, right? If it's got to be implemented correctly, but you think through it, you figure out what you need to get out of this thing. What is it that you're missing today? And that's, that's one of the first question that I always ask if I'm doing, a BI consultation. The first question is, why do you guys start this project? What is it that you're looking to get out of it that you don't have today? Maybe you already have it. And they say, well, I have this report, and this is what I'm presenting. And that's where you go from there and say, okay, now is it easy to get that information? Is it duplicated in different places? Is the data, do you trust the data? Is the data rich enough? Where are you getting data from? And then you go from there. But the first question really to ask is, what are you really looking to get out of this kind of implementation?
Mm-hmm. Now, Ronnie, who's the ideal person internally at a co-op, for our purposes? Who's really the ideal person to lead the process, and what expertise do they need? Because I feel like a lot of co-ops may not have a specific technology person, and if they do, maybe that person's expertise might be more along the lines of building a website versus the IT side of things. So who should be, what qualities of the person inside the co-op should really lead this investigative process into business intelligence?
Right, it's a great question. I get asked that a lot. One of the things, it's definitely a strategic move for an organization to do a proper BI implementation. And if you want to do it the right way, a lot of folks say, well, I need some reports. That's an IT thing. You can go down, talk to IT, or your IT company, or any IT person if you don't have that internal IT. So if you just need a couple of reports, set me up with 15 reports that need to get, generated every day, every night, and get email. That's that. But if you want to truly talk about intelligence, where you're actually the system is actually digging data out from different sources, putting it out, giving you insights, where you actually after that are able to make decisions. It's a decision-making system, a decision engine. That's a BI, that's a strategy person. So somebody, typically CIOs, Chief Information Officers in organizations, are heavily involved in successful BI implementations. Somebody who's with the executive management understands strategy, understands vision, and also has somewhat of an IT background, somewhat. They don't need to be the person who's actually developing this, because it could be a tool that you're buying. It could be, you handing it off to a development company or something like that, or if you have developers in-house, you can do that. But the person who leads this typically in organizations is somebody at the IT director, somebody who works with executive management, understands vision of the organizations, understand what strategy means, understand, again, what those actors and measurements are. Really, at the end of the day, that is the guts of a good BI. Is understand who the actors are, what the measurements are for my business and for my customers, vendors. That's it.
You mentioned the guts, the center of it all. The next question actually is about, do you have any advice on helping groups make the mental shift away from using their gut to drive decisions, and instead replace that with actual data-driven decisions? Is there any advice or any, like, a story that comes to mind that's just like, this is why you should be using data?
Absolutely. Any of the BI decision, any of the BI implementation like we have done. I mean, I can only talk from experience and also from the BI research that we do. The 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 biggest thing that comes to mind is the biggest reason is a lot of the stuff that happens in organization is these mental models that we create, right? We kind of have an idea of what works and what doesn't work, right? And that's philosophically speaking in any business, in our business too. We kind of have an idea of what is working, but it's when you start getting that, and when you're actually talking to somebody and discussing that, let's say with a prospect or with a customer, and you're actually telling them, right, well, I know this is what works, but when you support that with actual factual data, that is data being pulled, and that actually makes sense, that discussion, that decision is a complete different discussion. That's a different decision. At that point, whatever you're trying to close, and not in business, but in terms of partnership, in terms of growth or moving a strategy, that close becomes right there. You have that decision made. You're coming in with prepared information, as opposed to mental data that you're saying, okay, I know that it works. Well, how do you know? Well, here's an example. For example, I'll tell you an example. LBM Advantage, and in 2008 and 9, they had, collection issues were coming up when there was a lumber organization, lumber building materials companies. They have very good members, but some members were going bad and going south, and that was a decision that they needed to make and needed to get tighter in collection. But the information that they had was, well, I'm sure they're going to go bad, they're going to go south. And why? Well, people challenged, the executive management and said, that's a lot of, investment you want to make towards collection efforts. So as they started collecting this information and they started getting more richer AR data, and they started mapping the data and putting that data, into historical data and creating these maps, they had a clear map, they had a clear picture. That discussion was a no-brainer. They said, absolutely. This points to this is telling us early on, at this point, there's going to be a problem, and it sure was, and they were really well prepared. So that's a perfect example in a buying group where it did work.
Sure. Now, how much does a consultant cost typically, and how much would a BI solution out of the box cost, and how much would a custom solution cost? Can you kind of ballpark some of those figures just to give our listeners just a general idea of the financial commitment that they need to make?
Yeah, it's always a question we get asked. There's no easy answer. I'm sorry, but it really, again, the answer really depends. It depends on a case-by-case basis. It depends on how complicated, or not even complicated, I'm not talking about complicated, but what are you looking to achieve out of that BI? Consultation really is, when you're selecting a, consultation, it's really on an hourly basis. There's an hourly rate, and then you understand the consultant, a good consultant would come in, have a first kickoff and understand what is required, and come back and give you a proposal for doing 10 hours, 30 hours, 100 hours of consultation, whatever it is. Sometimes it could be 2 hours of consultation, and that's required. And that's a good place to start if you don't have somebody internal. And then you can, and typically at the end of the consult, that consultation really leads to a whole solution, right? At the end of the consultation, you will know, an organization typically knows what their time and money commitment is going to be, and that's one thing that a lot of folks don't really take into effect. It will require time commitment if you want to do it right. And people say, a lot of BI companies, if you want to buy a tool, for example, they'll say it's $8,000. I'm just throwing something out of the blue right here, or $50,000. What they don't tell you is that they will require 2 hours a day from these two people, and that's money, and that's important. So typically a BI consultation is an X number of hours to do the consultation with a clearly defined deliverable, and the deliverable is, here's your BI solution, here's your actors, here's your measurements, here's what you need to buy or build, and here's the reason why you want to buy and build, how long is it going to take, what is it going to cost. So that's really a good way to start for some organizations.
Good. Well, unless there's any other questions, we are actually about 5 minutes over on our time here. So, um, Ronnie, before we close, any parting thoughts, or if there's any last minute questions, we'll take those. But I'll open the floor up to you just really quickly before we close this officially out.
Yeah, no, thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hopefully, there is some value here that I brought to the table. The first I would always ask is just really, that first question is, we've been through a lot of these, and a lot of times folks have just gone out and done a whole big implementation and never really used it. They didn't even require it in the first place. They really required a really small something. Some folks actually ended up doing a little something and they required a nice big solution. So that question comes down to sitting down with someone and really at the executive management level, getting to that, getting to the deep of your heart and asking, what is it that you're requiring to do out of this thing, I think, and what does success really mean from this project? I think that's the first question to.
Great. Well, again, Ronnie, I want to thank you and your team for putting this together. It's really good information, and I hope it was helpful to everybody on the line. That said, this webinar has been recorded, so anybody that registered and or attended will receive the link. I think tomorrow is when that will go out. If anyone is looking at, this webinar is part of our Prepare for Impact series, so if anyone's looking for more information about the Co-op Impact Conference, you can of course visit our events page on the ncba.coop website. You can also feel free to contact us, info@ncba.coop. I would encourage everybody on the line to subscribe to our e-newsletter. It's called Co-op Weekly. And of course, you'll want to look for the relaunched Cooperative Business Journal that's published quarterly. The Impact Conference is going to be a great event. It's really focused on the impact that co-ops are making in communities, the economic impact they make, and this business intelligence is a big part of that, understanding how co-ops can be more efficient and how they can really highlight and put a stamp on the work that they do with actual hard data. So with all that said, be on the look for more webinars this year in this Prepare for Impact series. It's been my pleasure today to welcome Ronnie to this webinar. I want to thank Medullus Systems for their associate membership and of course our audience for their attention. Thanks again, everybody. If you have any other questions, of course, you can email me. Ronnie, will we make this presentation available? Is that okay to do?
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Brian.
Will do. All right, guys, you take care, and Ronnie, I'll give you a shout offline, and we'll end the webinar there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.